Hi, I hope you're doing well. Well, here we are at the end of the year again. Hard to believe that 2025 is almost over. We are definitely at the final stretch. Today, we're beginning with the first major turn of 2026, the nodal shift to the 3740 channel. This is where the energy changes. This is where the year truly starts. From December 23rd, 2025 to May 14th, 2026, the nodes shift into the most forceful activation of our current global cycle, the 3740 channel, a full will center turned on for the entire planet. And the moment it hits, the emotional weather changes. You feel it immediately. The tone drops. The air gets heavy. Logic stops running the show. The mind steps back. And the heart, with all its needs, demands, fears, and truths, steps forward. This isn't a gentle influence. This is the tribe waking up because it doesn't have the luxury of sleeping anymore. Gate 37 reaches for connection. Gate 40 pulls away to protect what's left. And together, they create a pressure that pushes through everything: your relationships, your obligations, your alliances, your institutions, and every unspoken deal you've been relying on. Nothing stays vague in this frequency. Nothing stays hidden. This is where the world remembers what trust actually is and what betrayal really costs. For 4 months, the collective sits inside a frequency that is warm, yes, but also raw, volatile, and unforgiving. A frequency that doesn't let you look away. A frequency that forces one unavoidable question: who supports you? And who never did, even when you desperately wanted to believe they did? This isn't sentimentality. This is an emotional audit, a tribal reckoning. And it's the first step toward 2027. And we have to remember something important here. This is the final metaphorical call of the tribe before the phoenix cycle takes over. The last flare of an entire global era, and the tribe does not go easily. It clings, it bargains, it fights to keep the old agreements alive, even as they're already falling apart. The 3740 cycle is the last echo of a world built on shared resources, shared roles, shared survival, before the sleeping phoenix rewrites the terms. So the emotional intensity we feel isn't accidental. It's the sound of a closing chapter refusing to close. From here, the story deepens, because once the tribe sends out that final call, the nodes begin walking us through the layers of the 3740 channel, not as abstract teachings, but as lived experiences. This is where the world starts renegotiating everything it thought was stable. When the nodes sit in the sixth line, 37.6 and 40.6, the energy looks back before it looks forward. This is where purpose becomes a question mark, where the big spiritual why rises louder than the practical how. It's the moment you realize that the old agreements weren't just fragile, they were conditional. And some of those conditions were never fully spoken out loud. This is where you feel the old system's fatigue. You see the stories you inherited, cultural, familial, economic, and realize they don't match the moment you're living in. It's a spiritual ache disguised as material instability. The tribe wants reassurance, but Gate 40 is tired. And the world begins to sense that something deeper than economics is shifting. By January, the tone changes. 37.5 and 40.5 pull everything into view. This is where devotion gets tested, politically, financially, relationally. Everyone wants to know who's on their side. Everyone wants promises. Everyone wants guarantees at the exact moment those guarantees no longer exist. This is where global dependence gets exposed, where nations demand loyalty they haven't earned, where people cling to leaders, institutions, and movements because they need something to believe in, even if it's built on projection. But the fifth line doesn't cushion anything. It reveals the gap between the ideal and the real. And suddenly everyone realizes the world has been running on emotional credit for far too long. From January 19th to April 3rd, the longest consistent nodal energy, the nodes settle into Gate 37 line 4 and the 40 line 4, and this marks one of the most pivotal chapters of the entire 3740 cycle. Because the fourth line, it's not experimental, it's not reactive, it's fixed. It holds. And when Gate 37 sits in the fourth line, the collective begins to anchor itself in one specific question. What traditions are we still holding on to? And do they still work? This is where Gate 37 shifts from longing and negotiation into leadership by example, not leadership by force, not leadership by authority, leadership through consistency, the fourth line way. And in early 2026, this becomes unmistakable, because during this window, the world becomes obsessed with the idea of how things are supposed to be, how families should function, how communities should operate, who should earn the money, who should make the decisions, who should carry the responsibilities. The fourth line clings to what is known, what is familiar, what has always worked. But the trouble is, 2026 is not a year where tradition works, so the collective gets caught in a tension that feels almost primal. Gate 37 wants harmony. Gate 40 wants to retreat and protect its reserves. And the fourth line tries to freeze the system in place. It says, let's keep doing it the old way. Let's stay with the familiar roles. Let's trust what worked before. But the world is shifting too quickly for that to hold. During this period, we may see debates about who should be the provider, debates about gender roles, debates about what families owe each other, debates about who carries status or authority, debates about what tradition even means. And it won't just be political, it will be personal. It will show up in households, in workplaces, in community dynamics, in long-standing agreements that suddenly start to feel like corsets. Gate 37 line 4 says, we need structure, we need predictability, we need the old order. But Gate 40 line 4, the harmonic, says, we need balance, we need rest, we need to stop overworking ourselves, to uphold traditions that no longer make sense. The tension between these two voices becomes impossible to ignore. And here's the crucial truth of this transit. Gate 37 line 4 reveals the difference between tradition and obligation, between what holds the community together and what quietly drains it. It exposes where people follow roles out of duty, not alignment, where families are structured around expectations instead of capacity, where systems rely on the way it's always been rather than what's actually needed. And because the fourth line has influence, real influence, these old models don't fall apart gently. They resist, they tighten, they try to grip even harder, expect leaders to double down, expect institutions to cling to legacy structures, expect global conversations about protecting traditional values to rise dramatically. But beneath the noise, something deeper is happening. People begin noticing what no longer works. They begin questioning who benefits from tradition and who gets harmed by preserving it. This is the subtle power of Gate 37 line 4. Leadership through consistency becomes leadership through clarity. When something is fixed long enough, you finally see its flaws. And between January and early April, the world sees the cracks in old tribal structures that have been taken for granted for centuries: family, work, support, obligation, status, responsibility. This isn't collapse, it's illumination. The first step in recognizing we cannot build the next era using the architecture of the last one. By the time this transit completes, the collective has reached a threshold of honesty. People begin to understand that harmony cannot come from forcing roles or upholding systems that exhaust the very people meant to sustain them. Gate 37 line 4 is the moment where tradition is tested and revealed. It shows us that some structures are worth preserving, and others must be released before they calcify into resentment. And it prepares the world for what comes next. The deeper emotional unraveling of the 3740 cycle as we edge closer to the Phoenix era. By April, the nodes drop into the third lines, the practical heart of the transit. This is where experimentation begins. New alliances form, old partnerships fracture, families, communities, and governments start reorganizing themselves. The rules change faster than people can adapt. This is the moment the tribe realizes something uncomfortable. Survival is no longer about tradition. It's about adaptation. Gate 37 clings to the way things used to work. Gate 40 wants to retreat and protect what's left. But the world keeps shifting. and neither approach is enough to stabilize anything. People start redefining what is mine, what is ours, and what is simply no longer sustainable. This is where denial dissolves and the emotional truth finally emerges. By late April and early May, we hit 37 line 2, 40 line 2, and then 37 line 1, 40 line 1, the rawest, most honest expression of the cycle. This is the exhaustion, the burnout, the reckoning, the moment when the tribe globally admits, we can't keep doing this, not economically, not emotionally, not spiritually. People withdraw to protect their energy. Institutions tighten their budgets. Governments revise their policies. Communities pull inward. The system sighs under the weight of its own overextension. And then comes the truth of the first line. You cannot rebuild on a foundation that's cracking. You must rest, recover, reassess what is worth your energy, reorganize the agreements that shape your life. Not because it's noble, because it's necessary. This is the final heartbeat of the tribe, a 4-month period where the world renegotiates trust, support, reciprocity, and responsibility. A global exhaustion cycle that exposes the promises that were real, the promises that were illusions, the promises that were never going to be kept. It is the last emotional imprint before the Phoenix takes the wheel in 2027. And the reason it feels intense is simple. The tribe is fighting extinction. The Phoenix is rising. The handover has already begun. What breaks during this nodal cycle was never built to survive the next era, and what endures will be what was rooted in truth, not obligation, not tradition, not fear. This is the emotional cleansing the world must pass through before the mutation arrives. And this is where your script continues. Every time the nodes move through 37 and 40, the world is forced to confront the same question. What happens when the tribe feels unsupported? And what does it do when the trust breaks? To understand 2026, we have to look at the last times this energy showed up, not as abstract cycles, but as global turning points where the emotional fabric of humanity was stretched to its limits. The last time the nodes were in 3740 in this exact sequence, the world was smiling on the surface, but underneath, the foundations were already crumbling. The first hedge funds started to fail, liquidity dried up, banks quietly panicked. And yet, almost no one saw what was coming. That's the signature of this channel. It doesn't collapse the system. It exposes the absence of trust holding the system up. And what replaced that broken trust? A new kind of tribe, digital, global, unregulated. The iPhone was released. Early social networks began shaping culture. Connection shifted from physical to technological. Tribalism itself mutated. The tribe didn't dissolve. It migrated. When the polarity reversed into 40-37 in 2016, the world reached its emotional tipping point. Brexit, the US election, global polarization erupting into full visibility. Gate 40 fatigue turned into Gate 37's longing. We deserve more. We need fairness. We need community. But instead of unity, the world fractured into tribes of belief, fear, identity, and ideology. People clung to whoever made them feel supported, even when the support was symbolic, not structural. The tribe became loud again, but it didn't feel safe. It felt desperate. These cycles always reveal the same truth. When people lose trust in institutions, they seek belonging anywhere they can find it, even in the wrong places. The 3740 cycle of 2026 is different, heavier, hotter, more consequential, because this is the final iteration of this energy before the 2027 mutation. This time, the tribe knows it's standing at the edge of an era, and that makes everything sharper. This is not just another emotional cycle. This is the emotional ending of a global system built on agreements, obligations, shared resources, collective survival, social contracts, predictable roles, and endings never whisper. They press, they intensify, they insist. The global mood becomes a mix of longing and disillusionment, the sense that the world we inherited doesn't quite fit anymore, but the next one hasn't fully arrived. This is the liminal space before the Phoenix, the breath before the mutation. The months from December 20th, 25 to May 20th, 26 act like a pressure chamber, forcing every system that still relies on trust, political, economic, familial, social, to reveal its cracks. And the cracks will be impossible to ignore. Because the tribe does not surrender quietly. It rises one last time, demanding recognition, support, safety, reciprocity, and honesty, even as the Phoenix cycle prepares to dismantle the structures that once held all of that in place. This is the emotional threshold of 2026, a world asking, what do we owe each other? And equally, what happens when we can't give what we promised? This is the moment where the story pauses, because everything we've talked about, the exhaustion, the longing, the emotional audit, the slow unraveling of trust, is only the first movement of 2026, but it is the one that sets the tone for everything that follows. The 3740 cycle is the final heartbeat of the tribe, the last flare of an era built on shared effort, shared resources, and shared survival. It's warm, it's human, it's familiar, and it's leaving. And before the Phoenix cycle takes over, before the mutation changes what it means to be together, the tribe calls out one more time. Do we still belong to each other? And if not, what comes next? As these months unfold, the answers won't come from the mind. They'll come from the gut, the heart, the emotional body, from the places where truth refuses to be ignored. So pay attention to what rises. Pay attention to what falls away. Pay attention to who shows up when things get real. Because this nodal shift isn't just a transit, it's a turning point, a clearing of space, a final reminder of what connection used to mean before 2027 rewrites the language entirely. If this helped you understand the deeper emotional movement of 2026, feel free to like, subscribe, and stay with me for the next chapter. There's more to explore, and this is only the beginning. Until next time, take care and bye for now.